Family and friends, we are here to remember Seth Harris. And in our tradition, we do so by looking into the book of Psalms for comfort. There it is written, Esayinai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the Eternal, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai yishmor seitecha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. May the Eternal guard your soul in your going and your coming, now and forevermore. Adonai roi lo echsar, benodesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinachaleni. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and with staff you comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. Death has summoned our beloved Seth Bennett Harris. Our souls cry out unto you, O God. What are we? Are we the creatures of dust whose destiny is but to return to the dust from which we came? The ancient sage has taught us the spirit of the human being is the lamp of the Eternal. Not even the darkness of death can extinguish the light which the Eternal has kindled in the sanctuary of the human soul. Therefore, O God, we thank you in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of our cherished Seth, and which is now revealed to us in all of its beauty. For his love that united us in life, in which death cannot sever. For his companionship, which we shared along life's path, and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and of his mind, which brought us joy and happiness and now have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we give you our praise. Grant unto us, O God, the strength of all the generations of our people who in the face of bereavement proclaimed, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away, still blessed be the name of God. In ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan. God, you have given us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in Seth's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and your love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. The story of the Jewish people begins with a call from God to Abraham. Lech lecha, go forth to the land that I will show you, and contains a promise to Abraham. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Seth Harris must have heard these words dozens of times in the sanctuary as he attended Park Synagogue from his childhood education through his years accompanying his mother to services, sitting next to his own children, and with Lily. For this reading comes about each year in this fall. If he realized he identified with Abraham, I'm not sure. But Seth's actions and his character embraced the Abrahamic model. And Seth's blessing likewise reflected the ancient promise. Abraham was the first Jewish adventurer, leaving his original hometown to set off to a new area where he had to make himself fit in. The biblical Abraham was fearless in his character, advocating for those also in need of blessings. And Abraham created a family that would carry forth his good name and honor it. For all these reasons, he is venerated as the patriarch of our tradition and the inspiration for several others. Like the biblical Abraham, Seth was a great adventurer. Born February 10th, 1940, Seth grew up in an age where leaving the west side of Cleveland to set forth for the east side was actually quite a commitment. When his parents, Milford and Lillian, bought his grandparents' house on Warrington Road in Shaker Heights, Seth had to learn how to fit in. Seth's grandparents had been the first Jewish family to enter Shaker in 1925. And even then, as Seth moved in, there were still many restrictions in place. Here came Seth, a dashingly handsome, tough guy kind of guy, greaser type maybe, into the preppy world of his new high school. He stood out like an oddity there, but by sheer force of personality, with his wonderful sense of humor and his gregarious, no-holds-barred nature, he soon made his way into this new world. He and his younger brother by 2 years, Matthew, would end up playing on the football team, quite a big deal in those days especially. And Seth's sense of adventure, going to new places, trying new things, would never wane. He went on to attend The Ohio State University, where he was a member of the ZBT fraternity and played varsity hockey. In 1959, he was part of the undefeated conference championship team. As he graduated, his father became ill, and Seth felt a strong obligation to return to work the business. Seth had grown up working in his parents' drugstores and wholesale business, and under his careful guidance and with his entrepreneurial spirit, he grew the business to one of the largest drug wholesalers in the United States, employing over 1,000 workers. It was in this context of Harris Wholesale that I first met Seth, shortly before he sold the business in 1988. He was the supplier for my husband's pharmacy, and everyone looked forward to Harris boxes arriving in a timely manner. We still have some of what we refer to as Harris boxes, with those easy-to-transport handles. Most every pharmacist of an era would know of these and the man who stood behind them. Outgoing and personable, Seth liked to visit the pharmacies that he served, and he was friendly with many of the owners in multi-generational ways. Indeed, he was all about the multi-generational engagement with the business. He remained devoted to his mother, Lillian, who lived to be 104 and worked the business into her 90s. And Scott, too, made time making deliveries on behalf of Harris Wholesale. A great inspiration to him, Lillian, his mom, was a graduate of the Flora Mather School and devoted her earlier career as a social worker to bettering people's lives through education. In later years, Seth would pick up her spirit to endow the Case Western Reserve Mandel School of Social Work Library and to fund a chair in the department. And he would become involved in the Case Weatherhead School of Management, something he knew a lot about. That was a small fraction of the public side of his philanthropy, but the private side included helping to support people's interests and passions. He loved people and he loved seeing them thrive. He even gave dating advice to his gardener. But he was a lot more than talk. When a young person wanted to make a movie, he sat at Seth's kitchen table and explained his project, and Seth recognized his spark and gave him $25,000 to get it going. Another time, he paid for a person's college and further helped someone secure a mortgage by being the down payment. He had a soft spot for veterans who needed additional support, and working as a court-appointed bankruptcy trustee, he helped many from all walks of life get their lives back. Seth valued giving young people the opportunity to get their lives off to a good start so much that he would go on to be a founding philanthropist and advisor for the Breakthrough Charter Schools, helping to fill the school year by year as they added grades. Hands-on in everything he did, he was grateful that others were willing to be hands-on with him too. An interesting serendipitous exchange in that regard led to a life-saving moment for Seth. After introducing him to his new neighbor across the street, he offered, "I'm here if you need anything." As it turned out, it was Seth who would need a huge favor of his neighbor, Dr. Toby Cosgrove. After some coaxing by Seth, he could be charming and determined, as many of us know. Dr. Cosgrove ended up squeezing in Seth's heart valve replacement as his last surgery before becoming the new CEO of the Cleveland Clinic. Seth would go on to serve on the clinic board of trustees and make not only financial contributions, but share his industry knowledge, which was invaluable. Seth made a difference in people's lives in small and large ways, serving on public and private boards. And like the biblical Abraham, Seth was fearless in his character, advocating for those also in need of blessings. Seth would be a blessing in the greatest way to his children, to Scott, to Hallie, and to Jody. And when Seth married Lily 18 years ago, Seth worked hard to make Claudia and Eric feel an integral part of the family too. Added to that were the spouses that came into the family, whom Seth adored, Amy, Bianca, and Daniel. All of you knew you could turn to Seth in friendship and in support. Shortly, we'll hear the memories of many of you children, the precious memories that you hold about Seth as a father and a father-in-law. It was his deep desire to make all of you feel like one big family that will truly shine through. And Seth did not stop integrating just that generation. For the grandchildren, too, Seth was larger than life. He made sure you each had your own unique relationship with him by showing interest in the things that interested you. I got to see this up close with Seth as we shared in family simchas over these many years. And while Lily is going to share with you some thoughts on behalf of all the grandchildren, I want to single out Katie and Andrew, who were unable to leave Chicago, but who will be listening today. Despite Seth's growing discomfort, he made a huge effort recently to take a car trip to see his great-grandchildren, Alexandra and Nicole. What a blessing for him and for you and for those little girls that you'll always have those treasured pictures together. Like our biblical Abraham, Seth created a family that would carry forth his good name and honor it for generations to come. And now Lily, this Lily. Lily, that legacy is left to you. You helped Seth to keep family at the center. It started with the log cabin that the two of you built in the backyard. And though together you envisioned and built the big house where everyone would fit in, the cabin remained Seth's favorite place. Simple and unpretentious, it kind of reflected the roots of his personality and the way he wanted to live with you. You shared his love of adventure and you encouraged him to do even more. And while he enjoyed your home in Arizona as well, it was being wherever you were that made him the happiest. You know, the number 18, the number of years you had together, is the representation in Jewish tradition for the word chai, or life. Your 18 years together were the joy of his life. It's heartbreaking that you did not have the opportunity to double that. Seth had some other interesting numbers that defined his life. He was 22 years old when he took over the business. He worked at it for 26 years before he sold it, and he had 36 years of a long retirement pursuing a variety of activities, including spending time with family and friends. And when it came to his friends, I think golf was one of the unifiers among the men. And he shot his age to become the recent club champion. A man's man, he was jovial and full of life and kept you all entertained. We'll hear from a few of his good buddies in a moment, so I'll let them tell you more about his wonderful laugh and certainly his antics. Seth's life could be summarized with four main foci during his retirement: family, friends, adventure, and philanthropy. We no doubt would have loved for him to have many more years to engage in all of these. Would that he had had the length of years that the biblical Abraham did, who according to tradition lived to be 175. But Seth Harris packed into his 84 years more life than most people ever get the chance to enjoy. And like our biblical patriarch, Seth leaves a legacy that will continue to have meaning for his generations and for the many lives he touched. We join with the sages to declare, Zichrono livracha, may his memory continue to be a blessing to all of you. Amen. I'm going to introduce the speakers all at this time, and then each of you will follow in as accorded. So we're going to hear from Seth's children, from Scott and Hallie and Jody, and then his stepdaughter Claudia and son and daughter-in-law Dan Zalewski and Bianca Harris, and then from Lily Harris, his granddaughter, on behalf of all the grandchildren. And then he's got some very special friends who want to share some thoughts with you. Bill Gluckhoff, who is a friend from Arizona, and some of his Cleveland gang, Norman Guinness, Eddie Tabor, Mel Resnick, and Steve Weinberg. I'll invite the kids to come forward.
Dad taught me everything I need to know in life by doing things with me. He worked hard and he played even harder. My early childhood memories were on Saturdays. His business was open and he would always take me to work and put me to work in the warehouse, giving me the most dirtiest of jobs. And on the way home, we would often stop in and visit one of his customers. And I was a little kid and he'd hold me up like this and say, look him in the eye and give him a firm handshake. On Sundays, everything was filled with adventure. We were always outside. We went horseback riding, ice skating, skiing, or hiking in the woods. He taught me how to do everything. He had a clay pigeon thrower on an old tire, and we'd take it out in the field, and I wasn't old enough to shoot with him yet, but he'd let me sit there, and every time he yelled, pull, yank the cord, and be there for all of his buddies. Dad was a cowboy who lived in Pepper Pike. He loved taking his young family west for vacation. We'd go to dude ranches. He thought it was very important that he taught us how to ride both English and Western. We had wonderful adventures out in the desert. We'd go skiing in Steamboat, Colorado, because it was a kick-ass cowboy town, and that's where we needed to be. He loved being with his family and his friends. He really knew how to have a good time. He built a pool in his backyard and had epic parties. He knew all of our high school friends and invited us to make his home the center of attention for everything going on. We didn't have a curfew. We couldn't stay out later than he could stay out. We always beat him home. When I got out of college, he encouraged me to make my own decisions and find my own way in life. And he supported every decision I ever made. I can't recall any time in my life where he gave me any unsolicited advice. yet he was always there for me whenever I asked. He was my mentor and confidant. Nothing is more evident of his enthusiasm for life than how he spent his final years. When he was faced with turning 80, he didn't slow down. He didn't maintain. He turned up the dial. He spent an incredible amount of time with his family and his friends. He traveled extensively. He and Lily drove across the country just because he hadn't been in a lot of states, and put her in the car for 3 weeks, and they had tremendous adventures. He skied more days. He hiked longer trails. He rode his mountain bike at breakneck speeds down treacherous hills, and he went back to horseback riding. All of this was after he was 80. While the last 4 months of his life were pretty tough, his 83rd year was stupendous. We spent a ton of time together, and we crossed off one of the last items on his bucket list, a father-son adventure to Alaska, where he signed every single waiver and did every single activity, much to the amazement of all the guides and other participants, and often with total disregard to his personal safety. He taught me the importance of optimism and gratitude as a daily regime, and this is how he wanted to be remembered.
When I was very young, my dad worked really long hours trying to build his business, but he always made the most of the time that he had to spare to be with me. I just vividly remember the front yard sports nights. My dad was not what you would typically now call a girl dad, but I still wanted to be a part of whatever sport he was teaching Scott that season. I was definitely one of the first grade girls who could run a Z pattern or knew the proper way to hold a baseball bat. I also sensed how important the value of education was to him. I'm sure that's how I developed such good study habits. I just really loved to see the look of approval on his face when I came home with a favorable report card. And of course, he taught us all to ski, and he encouraged me to go to Colorado for college. From all those ski trips that Scott was talking about, he would say, Hallie, there's a great college right over there. Let's go look at it. You know, I was only in 7th grade, but I think this benefited him as much as me. This love of skiing lasted well into our adulthood and even turned into a traditional yearly father-sibling ski trip. The last trip actually was when he turned 80, and then the last couple of years we switched to mountain biking and hiking themed trips. As I turned older, my dad was a huge mentor to me as well. While we were not always close in proximity, we made up for it for phone calls or taking hikes together during our visits. But when we talked, it was never a trivial conversation. He might just start with, like, how's it going, Hallie? But quickly it moved to how proud he was with all my accomplishments and how important it was to live a life where you're truly happy. Next was the financial check-in. Are your taxes ready? What are your philanthropic endeavors? And he was a huge believer in the 5-year plan. It didn't matter if I was well into my 50s. He would say, what are you going to do for the next 5 years, Hallie? And how do you see yourself? And how do you plan on getting there? I also feel I was my dad's touchstone to the family. From these long talks, he would ask about how my siblings were doing, and he always wanted my opinion on how he could help everyone in the family. I feel so fortunate to have a father who continuously took the time and effort throughout my whole life. And I plan on honoring him by making sure I do the same thing with my family.
Okay, sorry, bear with me, technology. Okay. So I'm the youngest, I'm the baby of the family, and I'm pretty sure of the 3 of us, I am the one who raised my dad's blood pressure the most. My dad and I had what I would call an amazing relationship. And I think what made it so amazing was that we fought so often. I I experienced my dad as, maybe some of you know, he was short-tempered. He exaggerated pretty much every story that he ever told. There were times when he was unaware of how his tone came across and the impact that had on me. He was also incredibly sensitive and would feel hurt. And then in response, he would lash out with his words. But my dad gave me the gift of showing me about what it means to be flawed and how that's just a part of being human, and that I can also have flaws. And at the same time, I can be worthy of love, and that I can live a well-lived life that is messy. So together, my dad and I, we grew and we learned the value and the importance of forgiveness and unconditional love. Now, this man, my father, has seen me through some of the hardest times, and he has never faltered. The idea of unconditional love can often be lip service, but my dad's actions have taught me what it means to be a parent. So when I was 44, I came out, and my dad was 74 years old, and he was 100% by my side. He was loving, he was encouraging to me to be who I was. And that's really what any kid wants from a parent, no matter what their ages are, just to feel loved and supported and accepted. Sometimes kids are assholes, even adult kids. And sometimes we take our feelings out on our parents because we believe that they will always be there no matter what. And this man has been that parent for me. He has showed up when life is hard, and he has been there when I have needed him the most. Thank you, Dad, for teaching me how to apologize and how to grow and how to be imperfect. And thank you, Dad, for showing me that love and support are not about making me be the daughter that you wanted me to be, but loving me when I showed up, being the person that I was. That was going to be the end, but I just wanted to say one really last thing was that I went through all of so many emails of my dad and I, and because a lot of times these fights that we had, they were notoriously through email. So that was interesting to do, but what was really special was the things that he said. And I just wanted to give a couple of sound bites. And I'm not saying this because I'm amazing or something, and I want you all to know that. I just wanted to share it because I just think it's really sweet that he would be this guy. So here's a couple of sound bites. 2017, Joe, he always called me Joe. I think he's the only person to call me Joe. Joe, I think you really are growing up. You've showed great understanding in your last letter to me, as well as compassion. It'll all work out. 2019, Joe, it was a tough conversation, but we were civil and understanding to each other. And for that, I'm grateful. Joe, we have guilt and shame, all of us, but we cannot let it consume us. I've practiced the art of looking ahead and concentrating on the future and not dwelling on the past. Yesterday's news is what used to be wrapped up in the garbage. 2015, Joe, I've never been more proud of you in my life. Your willingness to talk and openly discuss your feelings is one of the most honest things that I've ever witnessed. You've arrived, you will be fine, and everything will work out. Joe, sounded like you're going through a tough patch at the moment. I am around all day if you want a shoulder to lean on, and we'll give you a virtual hug. And there's just so many more, but I won't go on. But I just wanted to say that, I don't know, just thank you to my dad for just teaching me and just being so impactful and showing me the love and the support. And I feel like he definitely lives on in the three of us in incredibly unique ways. So, love you, Dad.
How do we summarize such a profound figure in our lives? How do we say goodbye to a pillar of strength, love, and support who was so steadfast, never wavering? How do we express in words what Seth meant to us with a short speech? We will most assuredly fall short. There is just not enough time. There never is.
About 20 years ago, Seth became a part of our family, or rather, we became a part of his. One of my first memories with him is going to the Cedar Lee Cinema in the summer of 2005 and seeing Broken Flowers with Bill Murray. Seth hated it. Claudia completely forgot about it. And that summer marked not only the beginning of our relationship as a couple, but also the beginning of having Seth in our lives. It was a good summer. He got heavily involved in the planning of our family's future. We were in our 20s at the time. We had absolutely no idea what to do with our lives. And he was always there to offer advice. And most of the time, he didn't even judge us too harshly when we didn't heed it. He embraced us as his children. And when we had kids of our own, he held us even closer. He ensured that they, whom he counted among his 8 grandchildren, were given excellent educations.
He urged us to join a synagogue that fit our personalities. His nudging, though not always gentle, was always done with love, and he is largely responsible for Liam's being bar mitzvahed last May. His absence from Claire's bat mitzvah in 2 years will be immeasurably felt by all of us. It will be his legacy.
Bringing 2 families together through a second marriage is never an easy task. But Seth was determined. No one in this room should be surprised to learn that he was very persistent. He meticulously planned vacations for all of us to take together, some of which were heavily itineraried with nonstop activities. But he had a plan. It was all geared toward creating a bond between us. You can see records of these amazing family trips in the many heavily detailed scrapbooks which he pored over. They're pretty impressive, and they document the gradual but very solid bond that he and Lily were cultivating between their children and grandchildren.
Their plan worked. There is no question or doubt in our minds that we are among family here in this room. We are brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, and grandchildren, all because Seth was determined to make it so. Perhaps this was his greatest legacy among so many. Whether we called him Boompa, Gramps, Stepdad, the man who married my mother, or just Seth, he was our family. We love him very much. We will miss him always.
So I'm going to share a couple of stories of Seth. The first time I met Seth was a bit awkward and a surprise to both of us. See, he didn't exactly know of my existence in his daughter's life yet. Our relationship was still very new. Hallie and her dad went on a walk earlier that morning where she clued him into the changes in her dating life, certain preferences, if you will. I vividly remember when she came back with a big sigh of relief because he expressed support no matter what. A few hours later, I'd be sitting at my computer by the kitchen front window while Hallie went to yoga. First, I heard the car, the loud engine roar of his jet black Mustang as he eased up the driveway. I could see the white hair, and immediately I wanted to run and hide. Like, what am I doing? I'm not ready to meet her dad yet, you know? I decided that, he already must have seen me, so I reluctantly went to the door, nerves and all. He was carrying a rather large bouquet of flowers that he set down on the porch. Oh, hello, I'm Seth, Hallie's dad. You must be... I introduced myself and said, Hallie should be back soon, fingers crossed. He explained that Hallie shared some information with him earlier, but must have left the part about me out. He said that he was bringing the flowers to her. He sensed that she was nervous and wanted to let her know that he was supportive. We ended up talking for at least a half an hour. You know, the man liked to ask questions. He completely disarmed my anxiety I previously had. He was so kind. Our first introduction began with a handshake, but it ended with a hug and an invite to dinner. For the majority of my life, my relationship with my own father has been less than ideal. Seth knew that and made a point to include me. He took the time to get to know me and listen to all of my long-winded stories and explanations. When we moved to Los Angeles, Seth flew out regularly to stay with us for a day or two. He didn't mind sleeping on the couch of our 900 square foot rental with one bathroom. The three of us would go on walks, have deep conversations, maybe some not so deep mixed in with criticism over the local priced meals. The lack of bread service was quite puzzling to him. Doesn't anyone eat bread in California? He would come for some holidays, spending it with us, Jody, and the kids. I'm pretty sure he brought Lily back with him after he realized I could cook. I will forever cherish these times together. He was so much more than what I thought a father-in-law would be. Really, he should be considered the standard of what a dad is. 4 years after Hallie and I dated, we got engaged. With that comes all sorts of little details and wedding planning. I wanted to avoid the whole walking down the aisle topic as long as possible. We finally did start talking about it. I swear it must have been instinctual, because Seth called and asked to be put on speakerphone. He began, "Hi, girls. So I had an idea that I wanted to run by you. What if I walked you both down together?" Without a second thought, I replied with a resounding yes. The following summer was our wedding, and Seth was a source of comfort to me. When it came time to walk, we wrapped our arms around his. He whispered to us to walk slowly so everyone can see us. He whispered some other bits of fatherly advice. Most memorable was when he said, "Just remember to be good to each other." Later that day, we were signing our marriage certificates. He noticed that I was going to be a Harris, and he was really pleased about this. I'd like to end with this. These last few months were incredibly difficult on Seth and all of us who loved him, but his entire family rallied around him. He refused to give up. We were there for some of the hardest moments, as well as some of the comical. Hallie and I assisting him with grooming the pesky nose hairs. He'd be laying in bed, fighting exhaustion with everyone from grandkids to his kids surrounding him. And I believe that if there is a way to sum up the life of a man, a life well lived, this captured it. We all just wanted to be there with him.
There are so many things to say about the impact Papa has had on us as grandkids, but the greatest gift he's given us is through memories. I'm sure between all of us, we could take up a lot of time, but here are a few that are most meaningful to us. Papa was a doer. Even once he hit his 80s, he'd still manage to squeeze more into a day than most of us cousins could. Our latest family trip took us to Montana, and while us cousins opted to participate in 1 to 2 activities per day, Papa's schedule was filled to the brim. He'd come back after a full day of dirt biking, horseback riding, and hiking just to turn around and be fresh for dinner. Meanwhile, the grandkids did our best to keep up and usually ended up, of course, late to the bus, which we all know was unacceptable by Papa's standards. That's just one of the latest memories I have of Papa's tenacity. Others include kayaking just last September in the London canals with Lily, biking in Italy with an impressive one-leg dismount in front of the fam from Papa, teaching us how to ski when we could barely walk, and later even trying snowboarding when Katie and I thought we were too cool for skiing. The list goes on, but his obsession for adventure kept our family on our toes. Papa was intentional. Once a tradition was created, he held it fast. As my older sister, Katie, got ready to go away for college, first of the grandkids, she got a call from Papa for a one-on-one lunch. Typically, we do our lunches or activities with Papa together, so we knew this was something different. He whipped up to our house in his convertible, and off they went. When Katie got back, the tradition was sealed. Papa would take each of the grandkids on their special one-on-one lunch before they left for college. I still remember our lunch at Taza. He let me know if I ever needed him, he'd be there. And something about the way that he delivered that made me know that he really meant it. Some of the other traditions us cousins came to hold close are walks to Dairy Queen using the shortcut from Kerrsdale, Corky and Lenny's lunches, tea at the Ritz once a year, family trips, go without saying, hikes through the back of the woods using the path that he created. Each of the traditions was rooted in togetherness and brought us closer as family and as friends. Last but not least, Papa was funny and Papa was cool. The cousins will always remember Katie's wedding rehearsal dinner when Papa showed up in a black, shiny leather sports coat. Safe to say, he always came dressed to impress. Whether it be his fashion or his cars, Papa was never messing around. And he made us laugh. It wasn't until recently that I realized not all Passover Seders include a section where fake bugs are thrown around to symbolize the plagues. Don't even get me started with Papa's Passover joke. His sense of humor and ability to laugh at himself is something we all will hold close. His kooky gifts, singing of random songs during family adventures, his pronunciation of Tuesday as opposed to Tuesday are all parts of Papa that will live on through us cousins because they're the parts of him that we'll miss the most. It's these memories and his love of life that's left an impact on all of us. Papa didn't just coast. He was one to throw himself into everything that he did. And I think that all of this will take a little bit of that every day. He was a doer. He was intentional with his actions. And of course, he was funny and cool. He was so much more, but these are easy bits to hold on to that make me and all of us smile. Going forward, I know all of us cousins and our blended family will remain close because these memories live on within all of us and always will. And most importantly, he'd want us to create more.
My name is Steve Weinberg, and I've been a friend of Seth's since 1988. I remember the year because Jody came to our house to take graduation pictures with my daughter, Pamela. So I remember 1988. At that time, we began traveling together, Penny and I, and Marilyn and Seth, extensively for about 10 or 15 years. We traveled to places that were rather exotic. Africa, Morocco, India, several trips skiing, which Seth loved to do. And during that time, I learned that beyond his competitiveness on the golf course and his participation in all sorts of outdoor activity was his support of the underprivileged. Among several charities, as the rabbi mentioned, was his interest in charter schools and providing equal opportunities for all children, regardless of their background. His philanthropy extended beyond this. His support for the Jewish Federation and untold other Jewish philanthropies goes without saying. His business successes allowed him to give back to society in many different ways. Seth was very generous and a bit eccentric. Generous He thought nothing of flying his close friends away in his private plane for a golf getaway. That was generous. Eccentric. I also remember having dinner with Seth in Aspen, Colorado, at a rather high-end restaurant. And as we walked in, I noticed that he placed his lit cigar on the ledge near the entrance. What did surprise me is that when we walked out, he relit the cigar. I said, Seth, he said, what? It's $3. I don't want to waste it. He's memorable and I'll miss him.
My name's Norm Guinness. Seth would be honored and so proud to see so many of you here to say goodbye. Someone had asked me earlier how long I've known Seth. Well, when he moved from the West Side to Warrington and went to Shaker, we were in the same high school fraternity, even though I went to Cleveland Heights and he was in Shaker. And we have been good friends ever since. But when I got to know Seth, he was 15. It didn't take long for me to realize that he wasn't a typical 15-year-old like the rest of us. He was kind of special. I can't put my finger on it, but he was just special. And I've had these thoughts of Seth for almost 70 years now. And he has always validated the thoughts that I've had of him and for him. I am here today with a very heavy heart, but for being with Seth for a day was like being at a lost and found. I'll be a little lighter. There wasn't a day that went by when he hadn't lost his glasses or his keys or more frequently his cell phone. But as far as the found part of lost and found, I can just tell you that when I think back of the found part, I think back as Seth being I found him as the best and truest friend ever. And I'll miss him and love him forever.
I should know better than follow these guys. They pretty much said everything there is to say. But Jody, you talked about raising Seth's blood pressure. I can tell you on the golf course, I've seen that blood pressure sky high many times, many times. To say a few words about Seth is difficult because he was such a guy. The best thing I can say about him is he was larger than life. He really was. He called me just a few weeks ago and said, Eddie, I'd like to get out of the house and I've got something I want to talk about. I came over to pick him up. He was very weak. With his walker, he could barely make it to the car. As I got him in the car, I was going to take the walker and put it in back. He said, no, leave it here. I've thought about that. And the only thing I can think is that for the next 2 hours or so, he did not want to be Seth Harris on the walker. He wanted to be Seth and his buddy Eddie out for a ride in the park. And that's what we did. We headed down in the park, stopped in Chagrin Falls, grabbed a little takeout, pulled into a picnic area, thinking we'd eat in the car. I was. And there was a table about 20 feet away. And Seth said, Eddie, it's a bright sunny day. Let's go out and sit on the picnic table. No walker now. So I went around to get him out of the car. And the two of us, leaning on each other, kind of Texas two-stepped over to that table. We sat there and he wanted to talk about the many golf trips we had all taken over the years. And halfway through that, he turned to me and he said, Eddie, I don't remember, how did all this start? How did we all get to be friends? And I reminded him that, because he knew that more than 40 years ago, my closest friend, Bob Wasbinski, and his wife built a big new home right behind Steve Weinberg and Penny Weinberg's home, back-to-back backyards. And Bob and Steve very shortly became good friends, realized they were both into golf, decided to set up a game. Bob called me, Steve grabbed his father-in-law, Joe Mandel, and off we went. And that opened the floodgates for more than 25 years of golf travel and golf games with Kenny Sachs and Bob Roth and Shelley Fromson and Scott Davis and Billy Levine and Billy Wold and all of the guys up here. And that went on for a long time until Father Time showed up, as he always does. We started to lose players. Gary Fromson passed, a little later Floyd Silver and so on. Some of the guys could no longer play golf, and it all fell apart. So for 2 years, we did nothing. And then 4 of us, with Seth as the motivator, said, the heck with this, let's put a foursome together and do it all over again. And we did. Seth, Mel Resnick, Norman Guinness, and I, for the next more than 10 years, did the same thing. We flew off to the various golf resorts, had a great time, sometimes twice a year. And every one of those visits, every single one, every single trip, Seth picked up the airfare for everyone. We fussed about it. He wouldn't do anything about it. The first year or two, some of us wrote him checks. When we got back, he tore them up. And it was just one example of a very, very generous guy who was larger than life.
Hey, we took him for dinner.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mel Resnick, and I'm fortunate to have had Seth in my life for a number of years as a very, very close friend. As Eddie alluded to, about 10 years ago, Norm Guinness, myself, Eddie Tabor, took off every year in July for an annual golf trip, which Seth was generous enough to fly us out wherever we decided to go. Every time we went and started this golf trip, we would gather on the first tee, all put our arms around each other and say, are we lucky today or what? And that was a phrase that Eddie Tabor coined. And we would say that every morning of every day of golf when the 4 of us would get together. Many of us today probably don't feel so lucky because we lost our dear friend. But in retrospect, we are fortunate to have experienced so many activities outside of golf with Seth. Hiking, biking, canoeing, skiing, horseback riding, activities that I didn't even know existed, that he performed and loved, including an activity that occurred last summer when Seth invited Norman, Eddie, myself, and our wives to join Lily on a hike in the woods behind their home in Hunting Valley. This was not an ordinary hike. It was a hike on about an acre of land where Seth himself, last summer, or before that actually started, he carved this trail by himself. Not only did he carve the trail, but he also put logs along the trail. He put little flags around the trail to make sure we wouldn't get lost. And he was just so proud of being able to share this hike. And it wasn't just a normal hike. This was a very, very difficult hike where he gave us walking sticks and we walked all over the property and we're just amazed. And then at the end of that hike, he took us to his favorite spot, his cabin with Lily, and gave us a catered breakfast. These are the things that Seth did. And as such, I think we are lucky today, all of us, for having the fortunate ability and forthwithal to spend whatever time we had with a very, very unique individual. We will all miss him. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bill Glickoff. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and proud that Seth was a good buddy of mine. I was happy to be his friend for over 20 years. We joined Whisper Rock, our golf club in Arizona, about the same time and played golf, often in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning group. You can imagine how it got that name. Seth was one of the pillars of the group. He was loved by his close friends and left an impact on each and every one of us. As a spokesman for the group, I'd like to share with you some common sentiments. He was a gentleman, thoughtful, smart guy. He always took time to say hello. He's always nice and made us feel good. He had really good memories. He loved life and got the most out of it. He passed on his enthusiasm to all friends and acquaintances. Good times going to dinner, music fest, trips to Las Vegas for golf. One of the most unique men I had the pleasure to spend time with. Great memories of his lists and suggestions, kart driving skills, and auditing of scorecards. Seth was often in scorecard probation. He had an avid interest in classic cars, even if some of his purchases seemed to be a bit questionable. One, I think, was a Pontiac convertible that somebody found in an old riverbed in Arkansas and put together with baling wire. He was an avid Ohio State Buckeye fan, passionate about all Cleveland sports teams. He loved golf, skiing, travel, horseback riding, and even more travel. I traveled to Seth last summer with Susan, Jody, and Jeff Gershenson to stay with Seth and Lily and visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We played some golf at Beechwood Country Club and able to take a picture of the scoring flight where he won the club championship in his flight. Congratulations again, Seth. I didn't know Seth before he met Lily, but he made one of the best decisions of his life. They had a wonderful, active life together, and we will always love them. We encourage all of us to enjoy every day and allow this to be a reminder to love your family and friends. We'll miss him.
Each of you has precious memories of Seth. We invite you to take a moment now to silently reflect on them as we remember him. Yehiyu l'ratzonim refi, v'hegyon libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May not only the words that we speak, but even our most precious private meditations and memories be acceptable to you, our God, our rock, and our Redeemer. Amen. We ask God to accept Seth's soul with the words of El Malay. I'll invite you to please rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Ba'maromim. Amsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Set Ben Milford Vilea Shalach Lo'olamo Bal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Knafav Lo'olamim Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar, Amen. O compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Seth Bennett Harris, who has entered unto eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us answer, Amen. We join together now with the Kaddish prayer. With sweet memories, we recite, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon u'v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach leolam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha berechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. A miracle is ended. A precious soul returns now to his maker. Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and of Jerusalem. Our service is ended. Bo'achem l'shalom, seitchem l'shalom. As your coming was in peace, so may your going forth be now in peace.